There is a daycare center in Minnesota that received nearly $2 million, and not a single child has ever set foot inside it. No laughter, no toys, no teachers, only silence, and government money disappearing into thin air. This is the story of ghost children and the people who built an empire on their names. Chapter 1. The Lake of Money No One Ever Saw. In the American economy, there is one simple rule. Big money always leaves a trail. If millions flow into a poor neighborhood, you can see it. Construction, cars, new jobs, new services. Money makes noise. It reshapes the world around it. But Minnesota became an exception. This is a place where the government spent years paying for things that never existed, for children no one had ever seen, for services that were never provided, for centers that were full on paper, but stood dark and locked in reality. Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes. But in recent years, one more lake formed, a vast, silent reservoir of public funds that anyone could dip a bucket into and pull it out overflowing. No risk, no oversight, no noise. To understand how this black hole appeared, we need to return to the darkest months of the pandemic. Chapter 2. Feeding Our Future. The first crack in the system. COVID-19 paralyzed the country. Schools were closed. Families were desperate. And federal programs rushed to loosen the rules. Less verification. Faster approvals. Reporting based on trust. Almost entirely. And into this chaos stepped an organization with a benevolent name, Feeding Our Future. Their mission sounded noble. Give us the money. We'll feed immigrant children who are struggling. The money flowed. And on September 20th, 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice announced, this was the largest pandemic fraud scheme in the nation. 47 defendants. Approximately $250 million in losses. The scheme was both primitive and brilliant. Fake food distribution sites that claimed to feed up to 5,000 children per day. 5,000. That's 100 school buses. A convoy of food trucks. Mountains of packaging waste. But FBI agents saw only emptiness. Locked doors. Deserted parking lots. Trash blowing in the wind. No children. No deliveries. According to federal investigators, the children were generated using a basic fake name website. Lists of non-existent names were submitted to the state, and the government paid for every single one. Some of the money went to Somalia and Kenya. Some went into luxury real estate in Turkey and East Africa. Some into Porsche, Tesla, BMW. Charity became a smokescreen for extravagance. But the most important part was the state's response. In 2021, when the Minnesota Department of Education tried to pause payments to review suspicious documents, Feeding Our Future sued, accusing the department of discrimination against the Somali community. The court sided with the organization, ordered the state to resume payments, and threatened sanctions for delays. That was the moment the system's safety mechanisms fully collapsed. And through that fracture, the next scheme grew. Chapter 3. The Evolution of Fraud, from Food to Daycare. When Feeding Our Future fell apart, one truth became obvious. The state was not controlling child assistance programs, and Somali Daycare became the next gold mine. The reasons were simple. Payments come every month. The amounts are steady. Oversight is weak. And most importantly, any suspicion can be reframed as racism. On this foundation, a new scheme emerged, one that would soon surpass Feeding Our Future in scale. Chapter 4. The PIN Code Economy, the heart of the scam. The CCAP program, The Childcare Assistance Program pays daycare centers up to $1,500 per child per month. Each family receives a unique PIN code to confirm attendance. It was meant to be a safeguard, but within Minnesota's Somali community, the PIN code became a currency. The scheme worked exactly as described in state audit reports. A parent gives their PIN code to the daycare owner. The center checks the child in every day, even if the child never arrives. The state pays the daycare. The parent receives a cut, $300, $500, sometimes $1,000 cash. The child never appears at the center. The service is never provided. But the government pays anyway. And in 2019, before the pandemic, auditors already wrote about suitcases of cash being carried out of certain daycares. Those reports were ignored. Chapter 5. The Bag of Money. By 2024, it became clear. This wasn't bookkeeping fraud. This was organized crime. One day before the verdict in the Feeding Our Future trial, a car pulled up to the home of juror number 52. A courier delivered a bright gift bag to her father. Inside, $120,000 in cash. The message was simple: vote to acquit and you'll get more. The FBI determined the defendants had surveilled jurors, collected addresses, tracked routines, and identified vulnerabilities. This wasn't an accounting error. This was a syndicate attempting to buy the United States judicial system. Chapter 6. Ghosts on Camera. Somali Daycare, 2026. By late 2025, Somali Daycare had become a parallel economy, invisible, profitable, and protected by fear. Until a YouTuber, Nick Shirley, disrupted everything. He took a list of the highest-paid daycare centers and began visiting them in person. The most striking example, Quality Learning Center, which received $1.9 million in a single year. December 16th, middle of a workday. Shirley finds a locked door, dark windows, an empty parking lot, zero signs of life. The video went viral. Elon Musk reposted it. Public pressure exploded. The state responded with denial. The video is misleading. January 4th, the official report. All 9 centers are operational. No violations found. January 7th. Quality Learning Center suddenly shuts down voluntarily. No legitimate business closes 72 hours after a clean inspection. Only those who know. The next knock will come with a federal warrant. Chapter 7. The City of Dark Addresses. In court records, audit reports, and media investigations, the same detail keeps coming up again and again. At many of these so-called child care centers, there were no children. Only addresses. On paper, they looked like ordinary daycare sites. On the map, they blended in with the city. But in reality, these were places you could hardly imagine as anywhere a child should be. Tiny office suites with no playground, no sign, no way a parent would ever mistake them for a daycare. Centers in houses with windows covered from the inside, blinds drawn day and night. Parking lots sitting empty in the middle of the workday. Locations where neighbors say they haven't seen a single child for years, and were sure the building was long closed. And yet, in state records, these sites were serving dozens, sometimes hundreds, of children. On some days, more kids on paper than nearby schools and legitimate daycares combined. What emerged was a shadow city inside the city, a hidden network of dark addresses that existed mainly in reports and payment registers, but reliably generated millions in public funds for their operators. On paper, they were places of care. At the door, they were nothing but silence and a locked handle. an address that mattered only because money flowed to it. Chapter 8. The Political Deadlock. Why did this continue? Because any scrutiny of a daycare run by the Somali community could be framed as racism. Officials feared lawsuits, media headlines, accusations of discrimination, loss of voter support. Fear became a protective shield. Under that shield, a shadow economy thrived, draining the state budget year after year. The silence that remained. In January 2026, the federal government finally intervened. Childcare payments in Minnesota were frozen overnight. When the federal government finally pulled the brake and froze Minnesota's childcare funding, the shockwave didn't hit the people buying waterfront condos in Turkey. They were already gone, their money already offshore. The impact fell on those who were never part of the scheme. On the single mother in Rochester who worked night shifts in a hospital and suddenly had nowhere to leave her child. On the father in Minneapolis whose son had waited months for a daycare spot. And now the waiting list doubled, because half the centers in his area turned out to be empty rooms. On the children who lost access to safe spaces and were pushed into improvised temporary programs, not designed to care for them. These losses don't appear in indictments. They can't be measured in spreadsheets. Minnesota entered what experts quietly called a social failure point. Dozens of early education programs collapsed. Hundreds of families were pushed backwards. But investigators found something even darker. When they analyzed Somali daycare payment records, they uncovered dozens of centers claiming 40, 60, even 80 children a day. Yet no one had entered those buildings for years. Neighbors said, "We thought it was an abandoned office. No cars ever parked there. We've never seen a single child." Each address wasn't just a building. It was a place where life should have existed, where there should have been laughter, toys, voices, chaos, movement. Instead, silence. Silence became the loudest evidence of the crime. The silence of locked doors. The silence of empty lots. The silence officials were too afraid to question. And while politicians argued about racism, bias, and optics, the silence grew. And now one question remains. If Minnesota didn't notice $250 million disappearing, how many other states are paying for children who never existed in the first place? Until someone is willing to ask that out loud, the doors of these dark daycares will stay locked, and every new budget report will begin with the same sound. Not noise, not outrage, but silence, louder than any verdict.